The alien fleets didn't retreat because they were outgunned. They didn't fall back because they had a secret weapon or a great military plan. No. They ran because something much worse was going on. The Titan-class behemoth, the strongest warship ever made by humans, was being eaten from the inside out. Biosynthetic leeches, tiny parasites that no scanner could find, were melting the hull and turning 36 million tons of reinforced steel into a dripping, dissolving tomb. All of the Coalition's allied species pulled their ships back. Every admiral in the galaxy told their ships to leave. Let it die. But what about people? People didn't run. While the biggest warship ever built melted around them, a small group of engineers crawled into the vents with blowtorches, chemical patches, and something that no alien species could understand: pure, stubborn defiance. This is the story of how people used engineering to save a dying giant and put the stars back together. The behemoth of the Titan class wasn't just a ship of war. It was a message. It was a mountain of reinforced titanium alloy and carbon fiber plating that blocked out the stars behind it. It floated in the cold silence above the Kepler 9 shipyard and was almost 4 miles long from bow to stern. There were 16 panels in the hull, and each one could take a direct plasma hit from a Valkyrie dreadnought. Its 12 fusion cores, which were arranged in 2 rows along the spine, could make the ship go faster than light in less than 90 seconds. And its hundreds of rail guns, energy lances, and missile batteries could turn an entire enemy fleet into floating debris in just a few minutes. It took people 11 years to build it. 11 years of hard work, budget fights, engineering breakthroughs, and more than a few miracles. During construction, more than 40,000 people worked on it in some way. Engineers from all of the main colonies had sent in designs. Some had spent their whole lives working on it. When it finally launched, with the fusion cores lighting up and the behemoth pulling away from the scaffolding for the first time, people in a dozen star systems watched and cried. Not because they were unhappy. Because for the first time in the long, bloody history of the Frontier War, people had something that could really keep them safe. Captain Ellen Shaw stood on the command bridge with her hands behind her back and watched the main viewport as the behemoth sailed through the Taris Nebula's debris field. She was 46 years old, thin, and had short brown hair with silver streaks at the temples. She had been in the United Earth Navy for 22 years, starting as a junior weapons officer on a patrol corvette and working her way up to the captain's chair of the most powerful warship in the world. She didn't smile very often. The war had taken that away from her a long time ago. "Status report," she said in a calm, flat voice. Lieutenant Danny Park, her operations officer, tapped his console and brought up the screen. He was probably 28 years old, had dark hair, and his quick eyes moved across data screens like a pianist reading sheet music. "All systems are working normally, Captain. The hull is completely intact in all sections. Fusion cores are working at their normal level. We're on track to meet the Coalition fleet at Marker 7. Shaw nodded. "And what about the Coalition?" For a moment, Park didn't know what to do. 3 Valkyrie cruisers, 2 Draenei support frigates, and 1 Korath carrier. "They're already there waiting for us." "Waiting for us," Shaw said again, her mouth twitching at the corner. "The Korath wouldn't even answer our call 6 months ago. They're waiting for us now." "The behemoth does that, Captain." She gave a small nod. He was right. Before the behemoth, the Coalition saw humanity as the least important member, one that was more tolerated than respected. The Valkyrie had their fancy plasma tech. The Draenei used their psychic coordination networks. The Korath had bioorganic ships that could heal themselves while they were in battle. And people were determined and had duct tape. But the behemoth changed the numbers. It was bigger, stronger, and had more weapons than anything any species had ever made. It wasn't graceful at all. It wasn't classy. It was a blunt tool, a sledgehammer covered in armor, and it didn't care about how it looked. It was interested in results. Results were all that mattered in the war. Against the Sithri Dominion, which had already taken 3 star systems and millions of lives. Shaw turned away from the viewport and walked over to the tactical station, where Commander Rick Tanaka was going over the most recent intelligence reports. Tanaka was her second in command. He was a big man with a shaved head and a calm, steady presence that kept the whole bridge crew grounded. He had worked with Shaw for 8 years, on 2 different ships and in more battles than either of them wanted to count. What do we know about the movements of the Scythery? Shaw asked. Tanaka brought up a star map on the holographic screen. Red dots were grouped together in the Ven sector, spreading out like a blood stain. These last 3 weeks they've been quiet. There are no big changes in the fleet. There are no raids on the outer colonies. Intelligence believes they are gathering again after the fight at Orion's Gate. Or they're up to something, Shaw said. Tanaka agreed, or they have something planned. But whatever it is, they haven't shown it yet. Shaw looked at the red dots for a long time. The Scythery were patient. That was what made them dangerous. They weren't in a hurry. They didn't make mistakes that were based on how they felt. They figured things out, changed their plans, and attacked when the odds were in their favor. Keep long-range sensors at their highest level, she said. I want to know if a Scythery shuttle even changes course toward us. Done already, Captain. She went back to her chair. The bridge was calm, quick, and professional. Just how she wanted it. The behemoth hummed under her feet, a low vibration that she could feel in her bones. It was like the heartbeat of something that was too big and too alive to be real. Ellen Shaw felt something close to confidence for the first time in a long time that IT wouldn't last long. Senior Engineer Mike Cole was crawling on his hands and knees through a ventilation shaft deep in the lower decks, in a maintenance corridor so far from the bridge that it might as well have been on a different ship. Cole was 51 years old, stocky, and had thick arms with old burn scars and grease stains that never came off. He had worked as an engineer his whole adult life, starting with cargo haulers when he was 19 and moving up through frigates, destroyers, and finally the behemoth itself. He knew ships like some people know music. Before any sensor could pick it up, he could tell something was wrong, and right now something didn't feel right. Hey Cole, a voice said from behind him, have you found anything yet, or are we just working out? Jenny Santos, his second in command, was a thin woman in her 30s with dark eyes and a ponytail that she kept inside her helmet. She was great. Better than good. She had an almost supernatural sense of how mechanical systems worked. Give me a minute, Cole said quietly as he shined his flashlight along the inside wall of the vent. The metal surface shone back at him, smooth and flawless, very close to perfect. He came to a stop, leaning in closer. There was a dark spot right at the edge of the flashlight beam. There was a small dark spot on the metal surface, about the size of a quarter. It looked like someone had spilled coffee on it. Get up here, Santos. She crawled forward and looked in the direction he was pointing. What's that? I don't know. He reached out and touched it with his gloved finger. The surface was soft. Not like paint, which is soft. Soft like the metal had lost its shape. As if it were changing into something else. He pulled his finger back and looked at the dark stuff on his glove. That's not rust, Santos said softly. No, Cole said. It's not. He took a small scanner out of his belt and held it over the patch. The readings were strange. The titanium alloy's molecular structure was breaking down, but not because of heat or impact. It was because of something biological. The scanner found organic compounds in the metal that were breaking down the molecular bonds. Cole looked at the readings for a long time. Santos said, we need to tell someone about this. Yes, Cole said slowly. Yes, we do. But even as he said it and started to come back out of the vent, he felt a cold weight in his stomach. He had worked as an engineer for 32 years. He had seen hull damage from plasma fire, asteroid impacts, and problems with the way things were made. He had never seen metal break down like living tissue does when it is eaten. He had no idea what this was. But he knew it was wrong. The report moved up the chain of command quickly. Cole and Santos wrote down the change in color, tagged it in the ship's maintenance system, and sent it straight to Chief Engineer Hank Patterson. He then sent it straight to Commander Tanaka, who brought it to Captain Shaw within an hour. Shaw read the report in her ready room, which was a small office with a metal desk, a window, and no personal decorations. It was off the main bridge. She read it 2 times. After that, she set up a meeting. By that night, 12 people were sitting around the conference table in briefing room 1. Shaw is in charge. Tanaka is to her right. Chief Engineer Patterson, a tall man in his 60s with white hair and steady hands, was sitting to her left. Cole and Santos were there, still wearing their maintenance coveralls. Dr. Lisa Chow, the ship's head doctor, sat near the end with her data pad open. 6 department heads took the last few seats, and each one looked a little confused about why they had been pulled from their jobs. Shaw didn't waste any time. At 9 a.m. today, our maintenance team found an unusual problem with an interior ventilation panel in Section 14, Deck 42. She tapped the table display, and the picture that Cole had taken came up on the screen. The dark spot on the metal surface. Initial scans show that an organic compound is breaking down the molecular structure of the titanium alloy. Patterson, the chief engineer, cleared his throat. We've checked the scanner data against all of our databases. The organic compounds don't match anything we have on file. They're not bacteria. They're not moldy. These aren't any known types of biological contamination that we've found in deep space. Tanaka asked, "What are they then?" "Best guess." Patterson sat back in his chair. "A biosynthetic organism of some kind. Something made by people. The compounds are too specific and work too well to be natural. This thing was made to eat metal no matter what it is." Everyone in the room was quiet. Dr. Chow leaned in. "Is it risky for the crew? In terms of biology, I mean. Can it make people sick?" Patterson said, "I don't know. So far it looks like it only targets non-living things. Our hull alloy in particular. But I wouldn't want to put that theory to the test." Shaw turned to Cole. "How common is it?" Cole said, "Captain, Santos and I searched the areas around the first patch after we found it. We found 7 more. Shaw's face didn't change, but her jaw got tighter. Tanaka asked, "All in the ventilation shafts?" "No, sir. 3 were in the vent shafts. 2 were on panels that made up the inside walls. 1 was on a support strut close to the port engine housing. 1 was on the outside of the hull where an inspection drone could see it." "The outer hull," Shaw said again. "Yes, Captain. That one was bigger too. About the size of a plate for dinner. And from the way it's gotten worse, it looks like it's been there longer than the others." Shaw got up and walked over to the window. Stars moved by, cold and uncaring. "How did this get on my boat?" No one answered right away. Santos then spoke, and her voice was calm and steady. "Captain, the behemoth docked at the Tari's Nebula refueling station 6 days ago. We got gas, food, and spare parts for the secondary cooling system. If this organism came from outside, that would be the most likely place to come into contact with it." Tanaka said, "The Tari station is a coalition facility. All member species share it." "Along with the Karath," Patterson said quietly. "The coalition's experts in bioengineering were the Karath. They didn't build their ships, they grew them. Living ships with organic hulls that could heal themselves. The Karath were the only people in the galaxy who knew how to make a biosynthetic organism that could eat metal." Shaw turned around and looked away from the window. "We're not going to start blaming our friends based on guesswork. I want information. I want a full survey of the whole ship, Patterson. Every deck, every section, and every square inch of hull plating. I want to know exactly how far this has gone. I want a biological analysis, Dr. Chow. Learn about these creatures, how they reproduce, and how to get rid of them. Cole and Santos, you're being watched all the time. I want to know about any new patches that show up before they dry." "Yes, Captain," they all said at once. "And one more thing." Shaw's voice got harder. "This information will stay in this room until we figure out what it is. I don't need a panic on a ship with 6,000 crew members. Not accepted." They walked out. Shaw stayed at the viewport looking at the stars. Tanaka stayed by the door. "Alan," he said. She looked at him. He only called her by her first name when they were alone, and he was worried. He asked, "How long do we have if this thing is eating the hull?" Shaw looked at the stars. "I don't know, Rick. The whole survey took 36 hours. 36 hours of maintenance teams crawling through every open space on the behemoth, checking walls, ceilings, floors, support beams, pipes, and everything else. The results were worse than anyone thought they would be." Patterson brought the report to Shaw's ready room at 3 a.m. His face was gray from lack of sleep and something else. Something like fear. "We found 214 sites that were still active," he said. Shaw put her coffee down. 214. On 27 decks. There is a lot of it in the lower sections in the outer hull, but it is spreading inward. The organisms seem to move through tiny cracks in the alloy that aren't visible on regular integrity scans. They settle into the metal, start making digestive enzymes, and the alloy starts to break down. At first slowly, then quicker. How fast? Patterson pulled up a graph on his datapad and put it on her desk. The curve began to rise slowly, almost flat. Then it went up. Then it shot up like a rocket. The rate of dissolution is growing quickly. As organisms eat more, they make more of themselves. They eat faster as they reproduce. We are in the early stages right now. Most of the damaged areas are small, surface-level damage. But if we extend the curve, he stopped. 72 hours. Maybe not as much. If the spread keeps going at this rate, the hull integrity of the lower 20 decks will drop below 40% in 72 hours. That's the area of catastrophic failure. Bulkheads fall apart. Compartments break. The life support system breaks down. The ship is dying from the bottom up. Shaw looked at the graph. The exponential curve went up and off the top of the screen. And at 96 hours. Patterson's voice was so low that it was hard to hear. At 96 hours, there won't be a ship left to save. Shaw called an urgent meeting with the leaders of the coalition fleet. The message was urgent, encrypted, and sent in a tight beam. 3 holographic figures stood around the conference table with Shaw and her senior staff within an hour. Fleet Commander Voss of the Valkyrie was tall and thin, with silver-blue skin and eyes that shone like polished metal. He sat with his long fingers steepled in front of his face and listened to the briefing without showing any emotion. Admiral Kesh of the Drenai was shorter and rounder, with dark green skin and 4 eyes that blinked at different times. She was the Drenai Collective's representative. This species shared thoughts and feelings through psychic networks. She already looked upset, like she could feel the fear coming from the human crew through the communication link. Commander Threen of the Karath was huge, almost 7 feet tall, and his body looked like it was made of layers of organic plating that moved and breathed as he walked. His voice was deep and rich, like rocks grinding against each other. Shaw explained the situation in a clear and concise way. The organisms that are biosynthetic. The rapid spread. The time frame of 72 hours. She gave them the data, the scans, and the pictures of the metal that was dissolving. The silence lasted exactly 4 seconds after she was done. First, Voss spoke. This is a parasite that is made up of both living and non-living things. Built. Focused. Captain Shaw, this is not an accident. This is an attack, Shaw said. We came to the same conclusion. But we don't know who used it or how it got there. Kesh's 4 eyes narrowed. The Scythery. This is how they do it. Not a direct fight. Getting in. Bribery. Before they attack, they plant adaptable plagues in other worlds. We have seen this pattern before. Threen moved and the organic plating on him rippled. The Karath Biological Council doesn't have any information about this particular organism. But the design ideas fit with the Scythery bioweapon philosophy. A weapon that eats up infrastructure. Beautiful. Scary, Shaw asked directly, can you help us stop it? Another quiet moment. This time longer. Voss spoke slowly and carefully. The Valkyrie fleet doesn't have the tools it needs to fight biological threats like this. Our plasma technology is meant for fighting between ships, not for getting sick with tiny germs. We suggest that the behemoth be evacuated and the ship be quarantined at a safe distance. Evacuation, Shaw said again. The Drenai Collective agrees, Kesh said, but her voice was apologetic. Our psychic coordination networks are strong, but they can't work with parasites that aren't alive. We don't have any biological defenses to offer. The best thing to do would be to evacuate and quarantine. Shaw turned to Threen. The coalition's expert in bioengineering was the Karath. They were the only ones who could help. Threen was quiet for a while. His voice was heavy when he spoke. Captain Shaw. The Karath have looked at a lot of biosynthetic life forms. We have made ways to fight off dozens of man-made plagues. But this organism, it reproduces very quickly. Its digestive enzymes can change their chemical makeup when they meet resistance. It would take weeks for the Karath Biological Council to make a counteragent, even if they started today. Maybe months. Shah said, "We have 72 hours. Threen said, "I know." The Karath also suggest evacuation for this reason. The three holograms stood there and waited. The coalition, which is made up of the most advanced civilizations in this part of the galaxy, all agreed on the same thing. Leave the ship and run. Let it go. Tanaka looked at Shah. He looked her in the eye. She saw it there, the same thing she was thinking. She looked back at the leaders of the coalition. I agree with the coalition's assessment. And I get the reasoning. But I'm not leaving this ship. Voss blinked. Captain Shaw, we have lost the behemoth. We can't stop the infection with the technology we have now. Staying on board means death. Fleet Commander, with all due respect, you're wrong. Your technology can't stop the infection. But we haven't used ours yet. Kesh tilted her head and said, Your technology? Captain, we have looked over the medical and scientific capabilities of your ship. You don't have anything that can stop a biosynthetic organism this complex. You're right, Shaw said. We don't have anything that can stop it. But we might have something that can run faster than it. The three leaders looked at each other. Not sure what to do. Doubtful. Explain, Threen said. We can't kill the infection, so we keep it contained. We set it on fire. We cut out the bad parts and weld new plating over the wounds. We use engineering, not biology, to fight it. We don't need to know what the organism is. We just have to be faster than it. Voss shook his head slowly. Sir. The size of the infection. There are 200 active sites on 27 decks. You would have to fix each site by hand while the infection spreads. Shaw said, I have 600 engineers on this ship. The work alone. And every last one of them knows what's at stake. It's not logical, Kesh said in a low voice. The chance of success is low, Shaw said. I understand. But the Behemoth is the strongest warship that people have ever made. It is the Coalition fleet's main ship. The Sithri will take the Ven sector if we lose it. After that, they take the outer colonies. After that, they take Earth. I won't let this ship die just because a tiny parasite thinks it can eat faster than we can weld. The room for the conference was quiet. Then Threen did something that surprised everyone. He laughed. A low, rumbling sound that made the holographic display flash. People, he said. You are either the most foolish or the most brave species in the galaxy. Maybe both. Maybe, Shaw said. But we're not going. One by one, the coalition leaders signed off. Their fleets pulled back to a safe distance, keeping the Behemoth in a quarantine zone. Standard procedure for a ship that is considered to be biologically compromised. Shaw saw the last holographic figure disappear, then she turned to her senior staff. Okay, she said. Let's get to work. The order to leave went out at 6 in the morning the next day. People who weren't directly involved in the fight to save the ship, such as non-essential personnel, civilians, and families. The shuttles took off in waves, bringing almost 4,000 people to the Coalition quarantine zone, where they would be safe. Kids pressed their faces against the windows of the shuttle and stared at the huge ship that had been their home. A few of them were crying. A few of them waved. From the bridge, Shaw watched. She didn't wave back. She didn't have the money to feel that way right now. She opened the ship-wide communication channel after the last shuttle left the hangar. This is Captain Shaw. You all know what's going on with our ship by now. A living thing is eating the hull. It's getting worse and spreading quickly. Our coalition allies have told us to give up the Behemoth and accept its loss. She stopped. Think about that. I have turned down that suggestion. We are going to save this boat. Not with technology from aliens that is more advanced. Not with a magic weapon. With blowtorches, welding rigs, chemical patches, and the kind of stubborn, unreasonable determination that has defined humanity since we first crawled out of the ocean and decided we didn't like the weather, we're going to save it. A few nervous laughs could be heard on the lower decks. All of the engineers, mechanics, and technicians on this ship are now working on Operation Cauterize. Within the hour, Chief Engineer Patterson will tell you what your specific tasks are. This is going to be tough. It's going to be risky. Some of you will be working in areas where the air is poisonous and the metal is melting beneath your feet. I'm not going to lie to you about that. She took a deep breath. But I'm not going to insult you by acting like you don't know what this ship means. You made it. You take care of it. You keep it going every day. And I know for sure that you won't let it die. Child. She shut off the channel and looked at Tanaka. How many stayed? Tanaka looked at his datapad. 612 engineers and technicians. Plus 340 more crew members who volunteered to help out. Hauling supplies, running communications, and being ready for medical emergencies. 952 people, Shaw said. Against a tiny infection that was eating a 4-mile-long warship. Those are the numbers, Captain. Shaw almost smiled. Almost. Cole was the first person to go into the vents. He had a blowtorch strapped to his back, a welding kit on his hip, a respirator over his face, and a headlamp that lit up the narrow metal hallways. Santos was right behind him, carrying a can of the chemical sealant that Dr. Chow's team had been making in the medical lab for the past 6 hours. It wasn't perfect. It was hardly tested. But it was all they had. Okay, listen up, Cole said over the team channel. 40 engineers were sent to the lower decks to work in pairs, each responsible for a group of infected sites. The plan is easy. We find the metal that is infected, burn it out with the torch, take it apart to get to the clean alloy, and then seal it with a chemical patch. After that, we weld a plate over the top to make it stronger. It doesn't look good. It doesn't look nice. But it will hold. Someone asked, what if it doesn't hold? Cole knew the voice. Tommy Briggs is a young engineer who works on Deck 30. Nice kid. I'm nervous. Cole said, then we do it again. And again. And once more. Until it breaks or we run out of metal. And I looked at the stock. We have a lot of metal. They began in section 14, where Cole had seen the first sign of color change. The patch had gotten bigger. It was the size of a quarter 2 days ago, but now it was the size of a basketball. The metal surface was dark and wet looking, and when Cole pressed his gloved hand against it, it felt like wet clay. Santos said, that's disgusting, behind him. Yeah. Cole turned on the blowtorch. The blue flame hissed to life in the small space, and he could feel the heat coming back at him even though he was wearing a respirator. Let's go. He put the flame on the metal that was infected. The effect happened right away. The dark, softened alloy bubbled and hissed, letting out a thick, acrid vapor that made his eyes water even though he was wearing goggles. The organisms were dying because of the extreme heat. But they didn't leave without a fight. The vapor was poisonous because it was the result of the digestive enzymes breaking down when they got too hot. Ventilation. Cole yelled. Santos turned on a portable air scrubber behind him. This small device sucked the dirty air through a filter. It worked. It helped but not enough. Cole carefully used the torch, making slow, overlapping passes to make sure he killed everything. The metal that was infected came off in layers, showing the cleaner alloy underneath. He stopped when he got to a layer that looked solid and didn't give way under pressure. Patch, he said. He gave Santos the canister. Dr. Chow's team made the chemical sealant by mixing industrial glue with an enzyme inhibitor that they found in the ship's medical supplies. It was a thick, gray paste. It was meant to make a barrier that the organisms couldn't break down. In theory. Cole used a flat tool to spread it over the metal that was showing, making sure to get it into every crack and crevice. He then took a metal plate from his kit, a square piece of titanium alloy that had been cut from the ship's spare part stock, and welded it on top. The weld looked bad. Not even. A shipyard inspector would have failed it in 3 seconds. But it was strong. One down, Santos said. Cole looked at his list of things to do. He had to clear 19 more sites in this area alone. Yeah, he said, wiping the sweat off his forehead. 213 left. The engineers had cleared and sealed 68 infected sites by the 12th hour. The work was hard and made me feel like I was going to die. The lower decks were hot, and the infection had started to affect the air circulation systems, making them less effective. In some places, the temperature reached 115 degrees. Engineers worked in shifts of 30 minutes, taking breaks to drink water and rest before going back to work. But the infection didn't wait. Patterson watched the spread from the engineering control room on deck 15, where he could see a wall-sized display of the ship's schematic. Red dots showed where the infection was. Cleared sites were marked with green dots. And new red dots were showing up faster than the green ones. "We're losing ground," he said quietly to Tanaka, who had come down from the bridge to see what was going on. Tanaka looked at the screen. The red was now spreading up, moving from the lower decks to the midship sections. Decks 20 to 25 had new clusters of infections, which were areas that had been cleaned just a few hours ago. "How is it moving so quickly?" Tanaka wanted to know. Patterson brought up a bigger picture. The organisms move through tiny cracks in the alloy. Stress fractures from normal use, flaws in the manufacturing process, and gaps from thermal expansion are all present in every hull panel. The organisms are very small. They get through cracks that we can't see and set up new colonies on the other side. So even if we close off one site, they can still get to it through the metal around it. That's right. We're playing the most dangerous game of catch-up ever. And right now the infection is winning. Tanaka was quiet for a bit. Then he turned on his communicator. "Cole, give me a report." Cole's voice came back hoarse and out of breath. "Section 14 is clear. Now we're in Section 16. Commander, we have a big one here. The whole bulkhead panel is broken. It seems like it's been sick for longer than we thought." "What do you mean?" "Bad enough that I can push my hand through what used to be a load-bearing wall. I need some extra beams from the cargo hold. And more sealant too. We're going through it quickly. I'll get it to you. Hey Cole, one more thing. How are your people doing?" "A break. Commander, they're tired. They're afraid. The air down here tastes like battery acid, and the walls are actually melting around us. But no one has quit. Not even one." Tanaka nodded, but Cole couldn't see it. "Don't stop. That's an order." "Didn't need one, sir." A young engineer named Sarah Kim made a discovery on Deck 22 that changed everything. Kim was 24 years old and had just graduated from the Academy's engineering program. This was her first job in deep space. She had been on the Behemoth for 4 months, mostly doing routine maintenance on the secondary power lines. She had never been in a fight. She had never been in a crisis before. And she had never crawled through a toxic ventilation shaft with a blowtorch in her hand to save a sinking warship. But she was very aware. And she was smart. She saw something that the others had missed while burning out an infected patch on an air circulation duct. The organisms weren't just eating the metal for no reason. They were acting in a certain way. They gathered around places where there was heat, power, engine feeds, and life support regulators. The infection was thicker where the metal was warm. She told Santos, who told Patterson, who ran the numbers and confirmed it in 20 minutes. "She's right," Patterson said as he looked at the data on his screen. "The organisms are thermotropic. They like heat. That's why they went through the lower decks first. That's where the engine cores make the hull's ambient heat the most. That's why they're going up. They're following the thermal conduits." Tanaka said, "So we can guess where they'll go next." "Better than that. We can send them somewhere else." Patterson's fingers moved quickly over the console. "We can direct the infection toward areas we've already cleared and sealed if we turn off non-essential heat sources on the upper decks and turn up the heat in certain lower areas. We can stop the spread. Make kill zones," Shaw said. She had come down from the bridge because she didn't want to lead the fight from a distance. "Bring them in, then burn them out." "That's right, Captain. It doesn't work. But it gives us time. We don't chase the infection across 27 decks. Instead, we make it come to us." Shaw saw Kim, who was in the back of the room and still covered in soot and looking like she hadn't slept in 20 hours. "Good job, Kim." Kim stood up straight. "Thanks, Captain." "Don't say thank you to me. Get back in the vents." Kim smiled. "Yes, ma'am." It took 4 hours to put Patterson's thermal redirect into action. 4 hours of changing the power systems, turning off the heating elements on the upper decks, and turning up the heat in 3 specific kill zones, on decks 38, 40, and 42. The crew on the upper decks were cold. Some areas got close to freezing when the heating system stopped working. Crew members wrapped themselves in emergency blankets and shared body heat by sleeping in pairs. No one said anything. People on the ship had heard what was going on below, and everyone knew how to do the math. It was worth it to be a little cold to stay alive. It was a whole different world down in the kill zones. Cole stood at the entrance to Kill Zone Alpha on Deck 40, feeling the heat wash over him like an open furnace. It was getting hotter than 130 degrees inside. The metal walls gave off heat and the air sparkled. "They're coming," Santos said as he looked at a portable scanner. The screen showed a moving wave of organic signatures, which were millions of tiny living things moving through the hull plating toward the heat source. Like moths to a flame. 5 minutes. Maybe not as much. Cole looked at the people on his team. 8 engineers are crowded into the hallway outside the kill zone, ready with blowtorches, full sealant canisters and charged welding rigs. He said, "Okay. This is how this works. We let them swarm the area where they were going to kill. We let them build up in the walls and on the floor. Then we go in and burn each section to the ground. Then we close it up and go on. The heat pulls them in. We make sure they never come out." "What about the ones that don't bite?" Briggs asked. He looked very tired. Everyone did. "That's what the roaming teams are for. Patterson has 30 engineers sweeping the rest of the ship to catch strays. We take care of the main swarm. They take care of the leftovers." Santos stopped looking at her scanner. "They're here." Cole could see it. The walls of the kill zone were covered in dark spots that looked like bruises on skin. The metal was getting darker and softer, and the organisms were digging in and starting to eat. The heat sped up the digestive enzymes, and in just a few minutes, the walls were crying a thin, dark liquid that pooled on the floor. It was terrible. "Now," Cole said. It was like watching the ship bleed. They moved in. The heat was too much to handle. It felt like walking into a fire, even though they were wearing protective gear like respirators and gloves that could handle the heat. Cole's face was covered in sweat, which hurt his eyes. Through the respirator he took short, sharp breaths. He held up his blowtorch and got to work. The creatures yelled. Not really, they didn't have mouths, lungs, or a voice. But the sound they made when the flame hit them was close enough. It was a high-pitched keening as the enzymes boiled and the organic material burned. It was a sound that got stuck in your head and stayed there. Cole gritted his teeth and kept going. His team worked together around him. Santos on his left, setting the ceiling on fire. Briggs on his right, doing the work on the floor. 2 more engineers were behind them, putting sealant on the cleared areas while the metal was still hot. 2 more plates to strengthen the weld. And 2 more hauling supplies, bringing new canisters and plates from the hallway. It was hard, mechanical, boring, and very tiring. "Burn. Take off your clothes. Close. Weld. Go. Set fire to. Take off your clothes. Close. Weld. Go." Kill Zone Alpha was clear after an hour. The walls were ugly with scars, welding seams, and gray sealant patches all over them. But they were strong. The organisms were dead, burned out of every crack and crevice. Cole took a breath and leaned against a wall. His arms hurt. His lungs hurt. He was pretty sure he had a small burn on his left forearm where the glove had slipped up. He said, "Kill Zone Alpha is safe. Moving to Bravo." "Copy," Patterson said back. "Alpha is holding. No signs of reinfection. Whatever Kim found is working. The thermal trap is guiding them exactly where we want them to go." Cole gave himself a moment. "Hold on a second." He then picked up his torch and walked. Shaw kept an eye on the main display on the bridge. The red dots were getting smaller. Not quickly. Not a lot. But they were getting smaller. Tanaka said, "The thermal redirect is working. Kill Zone Bravo is being cleared right now. Charlie is ready and set. Roaming teams are saying that there are fewer infections on the upper decks." "Less," Shaw said. "Not gone. No. The creatures are smart. Some of them aren't following the heat gradient. They're spreading out in small groups and moving sideways instead of down. The roaming teams are after them, but it's taking a long time." Shaw frowned. "Smart. You said they were smart. Not my term but Patterson's. But he is right. The organisms are changing. The ones in the kill zones were following the heat, but the ones on the outer decks are acting differently. They're staying away from the traps. Spreading into parts we haven't talked about yet." "They're changing," Shaw said. In real time, yes. Shaw looked at the screen. The red dots on the lower decks were fading and being replaced by the green of cleared areas. But new red dots were showing up on the outer hull at the very edges of the schematic. Slowly. Steadily. It was as if the infection was learning. "Get Dr. Chow for me," Shaw said. Dr. Chow had been in the medical lab for 36 hours without a break. She looked at. She had a messy bun in her hair, her lab coat was stained with samples of the dark organic residue, and her eyes were bloodshot behind her glasses. But her mind was very clear. It was always sharp. "They're adapting," she said when Shaw got to the lab. "The organisms work together based on a model of collective intelligence. Not individual thoughts but patterns of behavior that are shared. When a colony is destroyed, the organisms that live in other places change how they act to avoid the same thing happening to them." "Yes, in a basic way," Shaw said. "So they learn from their losses. It's not being aware. It acts more like an immune response. The group changes. As the organisms learn to stay away from hot spots, the thermal traps will work less and less." "How much time?" Chow thought for a moment. 12 hours. Maybe 18. After that, the traps won't catch enough of them to be useful. For a moment, Shaw closed her eyes. They opened. "Then we need to do things differently." Chow said, "I might have one." She opened a diagram of molecules on her screen. "I've been looking at the digestive enzymes of the organisms. They're very complicated, with dozens of different chemicals working together to break down metal bonds. But I found a flaw." She pointed to a specific molecule in the diagram. "I'm calling this compound enzyme 7. It is the catalyst. The whole digestive system falls apart without it. The other enzymes can't do their jobs. The organisms can't eat. Can you make it neutral?" "I think so. We have a chemical in the medical supplies that is an industrial-grade derivative of formaldehyde. It binds to enzyme 7 and stops it from working. If we can get it into the ship's air circulation system, it will reach all of the infected areas at the same time. The organisms would not die, but they would be stopped. Hungry. They would go to sleep in a few hours." "Do it," Shaw said. Chow put his hand up. "There's a problem. The chemical is harmful to people when there are enough of it in the air to kill enzyme 7. Not deadly, but it does make you unable to do things. Breathing problems, nausea, and confusion. The crew would need full respirator gear, and even then being around it for a long time could cause permanent damage." Shaw was quiet for a long time. "What if we didn't send it through the air system?" she said slowly. "What if we put it on directly?" "Directly? You mean by hand, site by site?" "I mean put into the hull plating itself. We put the chemical in the metal if the organisms live there. Make the hull poisonous." Chow looked at her. After that, she went back to her screen and started doing math. "It might work," she said after a minute. "If we mix the compound with a liquid carrier and inject it into the hull at high pressure through the maintenance access points, it would go through the alloy and get to the organisms inside. They would take in the compound through the same tiny cracks that they use to move around. How many places do we need to inject?" "More math. To get full coverage?" "At least 500. 500 injections given by hand on a ship that was actively dissolving over 4 miles. Shaw said, "Get me the compound. I'll get the engineers for you." It was the biggest engineering project in history, and it was run out of a cargo bay on deck 20 with tools that would have made a professional shipwright cry. Patterson's team used modified hydraulic pumps, which are usually used to circulate coolant, to make the injection rigs. They added new parts to the industrial nozzles, set the pressure settings, and linked them to canisters filled with Dr. Chow's formaldehyde compound mixed with a polymer carrier fluid. The mixture was a milky white color, had a slightly thick texture, and smelled like burnt plastic. 500 injection points were marked on the ship's hull, and each one was at a maintenance access panel where the engineering teams could get to the alloy structure directly. 500 two-person teams would work at the same time, putting the compound into the hull and sealing the access points behind them. There weren't 500 two-person teams. They had 300 engineers, so a lot of them would be running between different injection points, carrying heavy equipment through hallways that were hot, toxic, and sometimes structurally unstable. Before they left, Cole gathered everyone in the cargo bay. 300 engineers, mechanics, and technicians stood in rows, wearing respirators and heat-resistant gear, and holding injection rigs that most of them had never used before. He stood on a box of cargo so that everyone could see him. He wasn't good at giving speeches. He was a guy who used wrenches. But someone had to say something. "I'm not going to give you a big speech to inspire you," he said. "You don't need one. You know what's at stake. You know what we're up against. And you know what you can do." He looked at their faces. Worn out, scared, determined. The aliens ran. All of them. The Valkyrie who have cool plasma technology. The Draenei who have networks of minds. The Karath and their ships that are alive. Everyone who looked at this problem said it couldn't be done. They told us to give up. He put his injection rig on his shoulder. "We're engineers. We don't think that anything is impossible. We believe in the next repair, the next patch, and the next weld. Let's go fix our ship," they said. They didn't clap. They didn't have to. They just grabbed their stuff and left. The process of injecting took longer than they had hoped. For each access point, the hull plating had to be drilled into, the nozzle had to be inserted, the compound had to be pressurized, and the injection had to be watched to make sure it spread evenly through the alloy. A skilled team could do one injection in about 20 minutes. A team with no skills, 40. They had less than 18 hours before the thermal traps stopped working and the infection got used to it. Cole worked in Section 42, which was the deepest part of the ship and where the infection was strongest. The walls were soft and dark, and they were crying that thin liquid that made the floor slippery and made every step hard. Even with the respirators, the air was thick with vapor, and the temperature stayed around 120 degrees. He drilled the first hole, put the nozzle in, and turned on the pump. With a low, steady hiss, the compound flowed into the hull. He could see it spreading through the metal on his scanner. A white wave was moving outward from the injection point, going into the tiny cracks and filling the spaces where the organisms lived. He could see how the organisms were reacting. The organic signatures on the scanner flickered and faded as the compound got closer. They were getting rid of enzyme 7. The chain of digestion was breaking down. The organisms were going to sleep, one by one, like lights going out. "It's working," Santos said next to him, her voice muffled by her breathing mask. "Organic activity is going down in the hull around it. Down by 20%. 30. 40. Go on to the next point," Cole said. They got up and moved. And moved. And moved. 300 engineers on the ship did the same thing. Deck by deck, section by section, and injection by injection. The white substance spread through the behemoth's hull like medicine through a blood vessel, getting into every crack, fracture, and hidden colony of organisms. It was working. But it was also hard. Dave Morrow, an engineer, passed out from heat exhaustion on deck 28. His partner pulled him into a cooler hallway and called for help. Morrow was taken out and replaced in less than 15 minutes. On deck 35, an engineer's feet broke through a section of flooring that had been weakened by the infection and was no longer safe. She fell 8 feet onto the deck below and broke her leg. Her partner rappelled down, gave her first aid, and called for help. She wouldn't leave until the injection point was finished. Tommy Briggs found out that the area he was supposed to be in on deck 40 was more infected than the scans had shown. His drill went right through the walls because they were so soft. He made do by using his welding rig to make a temporary channel and then putting the compound through the hole. It took twice as long. He kept going. 280 of the 500 injection points were done by the 10th hour. 390 by hour 14. By hour 16, there were 460 people left, with 2 hours to spare before the thermal traps were supposed to fail. The last 40 points were in the ship's hardest to reach areas. Narrow crawl spaces, broken hallways, and places where the infection had weakened the structure so much that it was really dangerous to go in. Cole took 15 of them by himself. He crawled through spaces that were so small that his shoulders hit both walls. He worked in heat that made it hard for him to see. He put a compound into metal that felt like rotten fruit when he touched it. When his injection rig broke down on the 12th point, he used a spare O-ring, a strip of tape, and language that would have made a drill sergeant blush to fix it. The last injection point was finished at hour 17, 45 minutes before the deadline. Cole was sitting on the floor of a maintenance corridor on deck 42, his back against the wall and his blowtorch next to him. He was shaking with tiredness. Santos sat across from him just as tired. All points complete, Patterson's voice said over the comm, distribution of the compound with 97% coverage. The ship's organic activity is quickly going down. All monitored sites showed that enzyme 7 was neutralized. Cole closed his eyes. Cole? Patterson's voice came again. Did you hear me? I heard you, Chief. It's working. The infection is going to sleep. You did it? Cole opened his eyes and saw Santos. She had a smile on her face. It was a tired smile, the kind that comes from a place beyond being tired, from deep inside where the body had given everything and the spirit was all that was left. We did it, Cole said. For the next 48 hours they cleaned up. With the organisms dormant, the engineering teams could work carefully, replacing weak parts, strengthening structural supports, and adding more sealant to every area that needed it. The behemoth had scars. That was plain to see. There were welding seams, mismatched metal plates, and gray sealant all over the lower decks. They had used whatever materials they could find to strengthen the support beams. In some cases, this meant using cargo straps and industrial glue. The ship's beautiful inside was gone, and in its place was the ugly, raw evidence of desperate repairs. But it was still there. Patterson ran structural integrity tests every hour, and the numbers stayed the same every hour. The hull's overall integrity was down from 100% to 68%, but it was still stable. The life support system was working. The engines were running. The weapon systems were working. The behemoth was still alive. Shaw stood on the bridge and watched the main display as the last red dots on the ship's schematic blinked and then went away. Everything is green. The whole ship was green for the first time in 4 days. She let out a breath that felt like it had been stuck in her throat for 100 years. Captain, Tanaka said. The Coalition fleet wants to talk. Let them through. The 3 holographic shapes came back. Boss. 3. But their faces looked different now. Voss looked like he couldn't believe it. Kesh looked very interested. Voss said, Captain Shaw, and Threen, the huge Karath commander, looked almost reverent. Our sensors show that the biological infection on the behemoth has been stopped. The ship looks like it is stable and working. It is, Shaw said. How? Kesh asked, his 4 eyes wide open. Our scientists are looking at your telemetry data, and they can't figure out how you did this with the tools you had. We used what we had, Shaw said plainly. Blowtorches, welding rigs, a chemical from our medical supplies, and 952 people who wouldn't give up. You fought a biological infection with tools from the factory, Voss said. His voice was somewhere between disbelief and respect. Shaw said, We're people. That's what we do. Threen spoke and his voice was so strong that it made everyone else quiet. Captain Shaw. In the last 4,000 years of Karath history, we have seen 117 biosynthetic weapons used. In all of these cases, the ship or building that was affected was left behind. All of them. No species has ever been able to fight off an active biosynthetic infestation while still on the ship that was affected. He stopped. Until now. There was no noise on the bridge. Shaw felt like a heavy mantle had settled over her after hearing that. The Karath Biological Council will study your methods, Threen said. What you've done is more than just an engineering achievement. It is a change in the way things are done. You have shown that brute force mechanical intervention can stop biological warfare. This changes the way we think about how to fight the Sithri in a big way. Are you saying that you're ready to rejoin the formation? Shaw asked. Threen's organic plating rippled with what Shaw was starting to see as Karath amusement. Captain, it would be an honor to fly next to a ship that wouldn't die. The Coalition fleet got back into formation around the behemoth. 3 Valkyrie cruisers are on the right side. There are 2 Drenai frigates on the left. 1 Karath carrier is above. And in the middle, the Titan-class behemoth, which is scarred, ugly, and beautiful. It was the strongest group of fighters in the area. And it was on its way to the Sithri. Shaw found Cole in the mess hall on deck 15, sitting alone at a table in the corner with a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour before. He looked like he had gotten older by 10 years and 4 days. His hands were bandaged, his face was sunburned from the heat of the blowtorch, and his coveralls were stained with things that would probably never come out. She sat down across from him and said, "You look terrible." Cole replied, "You should see the other guy." "Oh wait. You can't. Because it's too small to see." Shaw almost laughed. "Almost. I wanted to say thank you," she said. "What you and your team did down there saved this ship. It saved the whole fleet. It could have saved the whole war." Cole stared at his coffee. "Captain, can I be honest with you?" "Always." "I was scared the whole time. Every minute. I was scared the whole time I was down there, crawling through those vents and seeing the walls fall apart around me. I kept telling myself, this is it. I'm going to die here. Inside my own ship, something I can't even see killed me." Shaw nodded. "But you kept going." "Yeah. I kept going. You know why?" "Why?" Cole asked as he looked up at her. His eyes were bloodshot and tired, but there was something fierce and unbreakable in them. "This is my ship. Since the day she launched, I've been fixing her up. I know every weld, rivet, and odd thing about her systems. I don't see her as just a machine. She is still alive. And I wasn't going to let her die. Not while I could still hold a light." For a long time Shaw was quiet. She then reached across the table and put her hand over his bandaged one. "Cole, this ship is lucky to have you. Captain, this ship is lucky to have all of us." The Behemoth led the Coalition fleet into the Ven sector 3 weeks later. The Sithri were there. There were 12 dreadnoughts, 36 cruisers, and more than 100 support ships arranged in a defensive formation around their forward command station. This was the biggest Sithri fleet ever put together in one place, and they had every reason to be sure. They had used their most deadly biological weapon against the flagship of the humans. They thought they would find the Behemoth dead, floating, and hollowed out from the inside. They thought the Coalition would be broken, discouraged, and ready to fall apart. They were wrong. The Behemoth stopped moving faster than the speed of light at the front of the formation, and the Sithri sensors painted it with targeting lasers. Nothing happened for a long, frozen moment. Then there was a lot of talk on the Sithri communication channels. Lieutenant Park, Shaw's communications officer, translated as it happened. "Captain, they're confused. They are reading the Behemoth's signature and can't figure out how it is still working. Some people are calling it a fake. Some people think it's a ghost." "It's not either," Shaw said. "Open a channel. All frequencies." Park opened the door. Shaw stood up, straightened her uniform and said, "Sithri Dominion. Captain Ellen Shaw of the United Earth Navy is in charge of the Titan-class Behemoth. You sent your bugs to destroy our ship. You didn't succeed. Your weapon is no longer dangerous, and all the Coalition species are looking at its secrets. This trick will never work against us again." She thought about it for a while. "You made a mistake. You thought you could kill us because you could make something that eats metal. But you forgot something important about people. We don't run away from problems. We fix them. And now we're here to end this war." She changed the channel and looked at Tanaka. "Get ready for battle." The Behemoth's weapon systems were turned on. Hundreds of railguns stuck out of their cases. Energy lances made a low, deep hum that shook the whole ship. Missile batteries are loaded and locked. The hull had scars on it. Welding seams and chemical patches held the lower decks together. The ship looked like it had been in a fight before the battle even started. But it was there. It was up. And it was furious. "All Coalition ships engage at will," Shaw said. The fight was very hard. The Sithri fought with all their might. Fire from plasma lit up the dark space. Missiles flew between the big ships. Smaller boats zipped and wove their way through the mess. The Behemoth, on the other hand, was the anchor. It took hits that would have sunk any other ship in the fleet. Its patched hull bent and stayed in place. The engines burned steadily. Its weapons fired non-stop, cutting through the Sithri formation with mechanical accuracy. The Coalition ships fought near it, around it, and because of it. The Valkyrie cruisers fired their plasma batteries with even more force. The Drenai frigates worked together to attack with psychic accuracy. The Karath carrier sent out its bioorganic fighters, which are living things made for fighting in space. They swarmed the Scythery escorts like angry hornets. The fight went on for 9 hours. The Scythery forward command station was in ruins when it was over. They lost 7 of their 12 dreadnoughts. The rest were running away, burning hard to get to the safety of deep space. There was no one in the Ven sector. Shaw sat in her captain's chair on the bridge of the behemoth. The systems were bruised but still worked, and the hum of the systems was quiet. The main display showed the field of debris, the Scythery ships that were leaving and the coalition fleet that was regrouping. "Report on the damage," she said. Tanaka looked over his console. "Hull integrity is holding steady at 61%. On the port side we lost 2 railgun batteries and on the starboard stern we lost 1 missile launcher. There were small fires on decks 12 and 14, but they were put out. There were 17 injuries among the crew, but none were serious." "Did the hull hold?" "The hull stayed strong. Cole's patchwork is ugly but it's strong. The welds bent but didn't break when they were shot at." Shaw leaned back in her chair and stared at the window. "Stars. Trash. Be quiet." "Captain," Park said. "Message coming in from Commander Threen." "Go ahead and do it." The holographic image of Threen showed up. The Karath commander looked at Shaw in a way that no other alien had ever looked at her before. "Respect. Not the kind that is polite and diplomatic. The kind that comes from hard work. Captain Shaw. The Karath have a name for what your kind did today. In our language it means those who don't want to die. We haven't given this title to any species in over 2,000 years. Shaw slowly nodded. "I'll let my crew know." "Your crew," Threen said, "has already made sure that the galaxy knows. The Scythery will not be able to get over this. Not because they lost ships. But now they know that their most feared weapon won't work against people. That makes everything different." The transmission was over. Shaw sat on the bridge in silence, feeling the behemoth hum below her. She knew that Cole, Santos, Kim, Briggs, and the rest of them were already back at work somewhere deep in the lower decks. Patching. Welding. Closing. Keeping the ship alive like they always did. Not with technology from aliens. Not with smart answers. With blowtorches and determination, they would not let the things they loved fall apart. Empires have come and gone in the galaxy. It has seen weapons that can break worlds and technologies that can change the rules of physics. But it had never seen anything like what happened on the behemoth in all its long history. When tiny parasites started eating the strongest warship ever built, every advanced civilization in the coalition ran away. They figured out the odds, looked at the data, and decided that the best thing to do was to let the ship sink. But people aren't always logical. Sometimes we're stubborn and sometimes we're reckless. And sometimes that stubbornness, that raw, unreasonable refusal to give up, is the only thing that works. 952 engineers crawled into the belly of a dying ship with blowtorches and chemical patches. They fought an enemy they couldn't see with sweat, grit, and the oldest human instinct. You don't leave what you built. You make it right. Today the behemoth flies not because of advanced weapons or alien science, but because a few people decided that no parasite, no matter how smart, was going to eat their ship. It's easy to understand the lesson. Sometimes the best answer in the world is a person who won't give up. And that's why people will always live on more than any weapon.